Hello, my name is Eric Hansen, and I will be doing my PowerPoint on the bipolar history of segregation in the NFL. So let's start when the NFL was formed, in 1920. It had some problems keeping teams, as they just kind of handed out teams to groups of guys who are willing to transport from place to place and had access to a park. It got so bad at one point that the NFL players only made 60% of their game checks when they played night games because the other 40% had to go for paying for the lights. It really was not being taken seriously. It was still seen as a college game, the league was laughed at. However, there were some African American players on the team. Pretty much, it sounds bad, but they were desperate enough to keep them. They were just open to having anybody, so they did play back in the 20s. On the left you see Joe Lillard, and on the right you see Ray Kemp. This would change, however, in the 1930s. As they started to gain more attendance and fans, they wanted to keep that positive momentum going, and the public's perception still was that sports were mainly a white-only game, so they kind of killed it before it could become a problem. There were some reasons that were cited for doing this. Number one was the interleague play system, wherein some teams, mainly in the South, would not allow a team to play them if they had an African-American athlete on the other team, which would cause games to be canceled. The NFL, they value ticket stubs. Getting canceled games was not something that they were a fan of, so they cited that there would be problems with interleague play if they kept the athletes. The economy at the time was not great. They were in the Great Depression, so they cited that having African American athletes on the team would be taking away a job that a white male could do. And scouting was racially biased as well. Scouts did not visit mainly black colleges and universities, so they did not receive recognition, as many All-Americans as many believe they should have, so they didn't appear as athletic on paper for coaches as well. This would start to change, however, when the Rams moved to Los Angeles and they wanted to lease the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. They were fighting with the All-American Football Conference, and they just wanted to play there. They were seeking the lease. There was a journalist named Hallie Harding who wrote for a primarily African-American newspaper in Los Angeles who cited the use of public funds. He put major pressure on the Rams to allow African-American players to be on the team because African-Americans in Los Angeles pay the taxes for that stadium to be used. Now, fearing that the Rams might lose their lease deal, they signed Kenny Washington. Kenny Washington was a running back and a quarterback who broke all sorts of records at UCLA in 1939. He was one of the best athletes in the 30s. However, those were the 30s, and this was March of 1946. Washington had undergone a few knee surgeries and wasn't quite like himself. Now, just a little bit later, the Browns would sign Marion Motley and Bill Willis, and this is part of their story.
After finishing up his career at Ohio State, Bill Willis coaches for a year at Kentucky State, a black school, and had no opportunity to play in the NFL. But after Paul Brown became the coach of the new league's Cleveland Browns, Willis wrote him a letter. Basically did not ask him for a chance to play or try out, but pretty much laid the foundation for the possibility.
Paul Brown knew what he wanted. He knew how to manipulate, if you will, to get things done. Paul actually had one of the sports writers talk to my father to insist that he stop by the training camp and try out for the team.
A writer by the name of Paul Hornick. And he bet him a Stetson hat. He said, if you stop by the Cleveland Browns training camp in Bowling Green, Ohio, I'll bet you that Paul Brown will give you a tryout.
The first day, Bill was so quick off the mark, and the Browns were just putting in the T formation. That was new, the snap to the quarterback under center.
The first time he goes around the center. Next time he goes around the other side. Then he goes under the center. Then goes over top of the center and lands on Otto Graham's foot. And that's when Paul Brown said, okay, that's enough, stop. He didn't want to hurt his premier quarterback.
Bill was a great player, and he had a firmness of character that was exceptional. My dad thought highly of him as a person, and my dad offered to sign him to a contract.
3 days after Willis signed that contract, another black player walked into Brown's camp. His name was Marion Motley, the same Marion Motley who played against Brown's team in high school and lined up for him in the Navy. Now, the 6'1", nearly 240-pound, 26-year-old Motley had left a job as a steel mill worker to come to camp, hoping to return to the game that seemed perfectly suited to his remarkable athletic gifts.
Paul Brown originally put him on the squad to become Bill Willis's roommate, but he knew what he had in Marion Motley, but he didn't know it was going to blow up as big as it did.
Marion could do everything. Play linebacker, he could run, he was strong. In those days, guys wearing 238, playing in the backfield, that was big. Even now, that's big. But the guy like that coming through the line, it scares you.
He was a train wreck, and I was one of the guys that he wrecked.
So why are these athletes not really remembered? Well, it mainly comes down to a man named Jackie Robinson, who a lot of people have heard of. He found immediate success being the Rookie of the Year. He appeared in 6 All-Star games, he was the MVP, he was a World Series champion, and he also played for a much more popular sport at the time. That's what people really cared about. Now, what did the other players do for their sport? Well, Kenny Washington unfortunately only played 3 seasons. He had 11 total touchdowns, and he's etched a little bit into history, not only reintegrating the league, but that longest run of 92 yards is the longest run in Rams history, which still stands today, and that was done in the 40s. It's a little glimpse into the talent that he had, but his knees just gave out on him, and it's really a sad story of what could have been. Bill Willis played 8 seasons, was selected to a few All-Pros, and was a 1950 champion with the Browns, but he didn't play as prominent of a position. He played mainly guard and nose tackle, and he didn't really receive much recognition until later in his career. Marion Motley played a very noticeable position in the 40s and 50s of running back, which was the premier position at the time, played in 9 seasons, got a couple All-Pro selections, and led the league in rushing twice, and also led the league in touchdowns. These players helped create today's NFL, which is the most popular sport. It's like what baseball was back in the 40s and 50s. And it's really a shame that the pioneers who helped create this game have been forgotten. Here are my works cited.